Welcome back to our daily show. Here's CJ.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring. Snowing and blowing up bushels of fun. Now the jingle hop has begun. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock.
Welcome back, 9:22 on this 14th day of December. CJ Nasello, Courtney McFarlin, and OSF Healthcare. I think that one's the right one.
Hello.
Oh my God,
Yes,
it is. So,
all right.
Backstory. I took apart the studio yesterday. I had to go do a little bit of a round table with Hainer Library, and when I put everything back, I forgot which cord was the wrong cord, you know?
Yes, well, it seems to be working.
A gamble every day. With that being said, a lot of conversations, especially around this time of year, as families gather and, maybe you don't see your older uncle or your older relatives maybe once or twice a year, and you're starting to notice some signs that we're aging a little bit. And there's always, it's always a good time to talk about this. Plus, with Bruce Willis going through that just awful illness and really raising awareness to this, it's really really okay to talk about dementia and raise awareness for ways that we can help the caregivers and everyone else that's affected by this awful thing.
That is true. So dementia, unfortunately, is actually a very common medical problem that we see typically in the older age of individuals. And I do primary care within OSF, and so I do engage with patients and more specifically their caregivers quite regularly regarding their loved ones and things that they do notice subtly over time with changes in their memory. And you're right, Bruce Willis, who is in my era, has been a very famous actor.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It could be, I
guess.
There you go. Yeah. So, he's one of my most favorite actors for sure, and it has been very discerning what has happened to him over the years. I know approximately about a year ago, he announced to the general public that he was stepping away from being an actor, and at that time it was known that he was having some speech issues. Real diagnosis wasn't really discussed, and then this February they announced his diagnosis, which he suffers from frontotemporal dementia. It is a type of dementia. It thankfully is rare. Not that common. I think it's estimated 1 in 20 million have it, so it's not that common. But unfortunately, that is what he has been diagnosed with. It is different than the typical dementia that we think about, Alzheimer's disease. It affects the body a little bit differently, affecting primarily speech, personality, behavior, social tact, way that you hang out with people. But definitely dementia in general is something that is a hot topic and something that brings families together over the holidays to discuss and address for sure.
Absolutely. And with that being said, before we go into the deep dive of this conversation, take me through your role at OSF Healthcare. So 10 years with OSF, and how have the 10 years been? Question number one. And question number two, take me through your experience working with geriatrics.
Yes. So I have actually been a PA for 20 years.
Wow.
Makes me feel old. I started out actually doing neuro-oncology in Evanston at the Evanston Northwestern Healthcare, and work with a world-renowned brain tumor doctor. And my married life and family brought me back to this area where I actually was born and raised, and did neurology for the first portion of my early PA years. And then that evolved into primary care. I've been working with OSF now. This will be my 11th summer with them. And so I've done primary care this entire time with them. I haven't changed positions since then. I really enjoy the primary care setting and really enjoy what I do and enjoy working for OSF.
Absolutely. And whenever you're working with your patients, I'm sure working with the families is a huge portion of that job, is at least to relay that information and make sure that everyone's on the same page. Am I stepping in the right direction?
That's correct. So what kind of got me into geriatrics specifically is obviously my first half of my PA career has been neurology, which for anyone that knows neurology involves dementia and geriatric care. Prior to coming with OSF, I actually paired with SI NYU School of Medicine and was engaged with them in a dementia program where it was like clinical trials. And so from that, when I became OSF, I kind of took the knowledge of that into my OSF position. And so we do within our office see dementia-specific problems. We have a 45-minute evaluation where we do the mini mental state exam, clock drawing test, various memory testing to engage to see kind of where the problem's isolating from. And so that love that I had early on in my career has kind of evolved into my primary care practice.
That's really fascinating. Yeah. And I always find it really cool how career paths wind and what leads you to the next phase. Yeah. And I think it's really cool. It ties in together in that regard. Circling back to Bruce Willis, whenever you were talking about the specific type of dementia he has, what do we normally see for our older adults? What type of dementia is most prevalent in the older adults?
Sure. So the most common dementia is Alzheimer's disease dementia. It encompasses about 70 to 80% of all the types of dementia. For the most part, dementias in general have the same types of symptoms where they'll have a loss of cognition. It can, memory loss, increased forgetfulness, increased repetition to their family members about certain topics. In with that is a change in personality and can also include changes in executive functions throughout the day, maintenance of activities of daily living.
On top of that, too, I think this is a great kind of spinoff here. Whenever we look at our older adults, and even me, I mean, I'm a forgetful person, right? Sure. I don't know where I put my car keys. I'm running around this building trying to find them to get out of, work. Whenever we're talking about things to look for in our older adults, is one of the things to take into consideration the personality of the individual before they started maybe showing some signs too?
Correct, yes. There is such a thing as we age, we become more forgetful, and that can be kind of part of normal aging.
Okay.
But when you're with somebody, a family member that is kind of going through dementia, there are just certain things that consistently become more evident to you that are just a change and not really, you kind of get the feel that it's not normal. I have a grandfather who is now passed that had severe Alzheimer's disease and was very close to him. So certainly understanding that from a caregiver standpoint and kind of understanding the cues that a family kind of sees through that process.
And I want to talk about that after we come back from break, because I think we could talk about that for 3 hours alone. Yes. and how much really support is needed for the families of the individual. But I want to talk about routines, because I've always found this really fascinating, is how you combat some of these, effects and some of these, things that you see with Alzheimer's and dementia. And take me through routines and how they're so important for somebody that's going through this.
So routines are very important. I see patients all the time with their caregivers wanting to know what they can do to try to help their loved one out that is suffering from dementia, and routine is very important. When you take somebody with dementia out of their routine, it actually can increase their mood swings, increase their irritability, and actually can make them more confused. So making sure that you're maintaining a sleep-wake cycle that's consistent on a day-to-day basis, that helps reduce sundowning that's very often associated with Alzheimer's disease, making sure that they're on the same breakfast, lunch, dinner routine, making sure that their medications being dispensed are on a daily routine, giving them chores throughout the day, even if it's as simple as giving them a pile of washcloths and asking them to fold them. That's adding purpose to their life.
Okay.
And so giving them tasks like that. What I tell my patients and their caregivers is the brain is a muscle. And so it's important to always continue to exercise the brain. It may be something simple to you or I who don't, suffer from dementia, but to that person that has dementia, just having them engage in things like that is very helpful.
In your role, is it pretty tough on you to see whenever you're working with a patient the decline over the years with the illness? Do you see that quite frequently, I'm sure?
Unfortunately, I always get the question from caregivers, how long is this, going to progress, or how soon, or how much do I have? And really with every patient, that is a patient-to-patient situation. For the most part, Alzheimer's disease specifically, it's a very slow progression over years. It's not something that's very abrupt and sudden. which I think is nice because it gives the family time to kind of engage and make memories and make an impact on the latter years of their life. But it certainly is something that's challenging for sure.
Absolutely. Why don't we do this? We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll continue this conversation right here at 9:31. Little bit of change on this 14th day of December. We'll come right back after this right here on RiverBender.com.
Since 1993, Sparks Junk Removal is always adapting to the needs of our clients. That is why we now offer weekly trash pickup for selected areas. Plus, we offer driveway-safe rubber-tired dumpster rental. Give us a call today at 618-781-1407 or visit us at sparksjunkremoval.net.
Macias Insurance Agency, providing quality products with extremely competitive prices. As an independent provider, we source multiple companies to offer the best rates possible, covering auto, home, business, and life insurance. Our goal is to provide quality service that meets and exceeds customer expectations. You can rest easy knowing the Macias team is working round the clock to ensure that both you and the most important parts of your life are covered. Our qualified professionals make the insurance process easy so you can live carefree and focus on what matters most. Visit MaciasInsuranceAgency.com today to find out what our team can do for you.
Not sure if you've noticed, but those advertised prices from the other dealers are just a bunch of blah, blah, blah. At Roberts Motors, the advertised price is the price you pay. And that, my friend, is great news for you. Don't fall for their so-called incentives that will leave you banging your head against the wall. Go with Roberts Motors. Prices you can trust and people you will like. That's the Roberts Motors way. And trust me, it's the way to go.
Has free checking become a thing of the past? Not if Liberty has anything to say about it. With 3 free personal checking options and even a free business checking account, Free is alive and well at Liberty Bank, the local bank that gives you free checking choices and more cashing in your pocket. Bank locally, bank Liberty. For more information, visit www.bankliberty.com.
RiverBender Radio has built 3 great new stations just for you in the Riverbend. The Eagle, the Riverbend's classic rock station. The Bridge, hit music for the Riverbend. And The River, today's country, and all your favorites. Check them out today at RiverBenderRadio.com.
Welcome back to our daily show. Here's CJ.
Hear the snow crunch, see the kids bunch. This is Santa's big scene, and above all the bustle you hear.
9:34, right microphone. Courtney in studio. OSF Healthcare's here. I like these type of morning shows where it's just a little bit more late, because sometimes it's just like boom, boom, boom. Conveyor belt at the Ford factory. But today, being able to sit back and just talk about something that affects us all.
That's right.
And or so many of us. And it's just focusing on the caregiver aspect of it. You know, you were talking about just a couple minutes ago about your grandfather and how close you were to him. And there's so many others that I'm sure were in your position as well. And you lose your best friend before they're actually gone. What are some of the things that a caregiver is going to experience whenever they're caring for somebody that has Alzheimer's, and dementia?
Right. So good question. Having a loved one that has dementia, there's actually a variety of stages that somebody will go through as a caregiver. The first stage is obviously recognizing that, and that's usually, and hopefully for us as practitioners where we implement a treatment, is in that milder stage. So for caregivers up front, it's really kind of just dealing with the diagnosis, learning how to accept it for what it is, and then starting to kind of learn what they can do to try to help that as the disease actually progresses. A lot of times up front, dementia patients will have some irritability, and that irritability for the most part comes from the fact that they know something is wrong, but they can't really place and understand what it is. Then as the patient gets into that more moderate and severe stage, they tend to lack their activities of daily living. So they don't dress as well, or they're really messy, or they don't eat as well, or they wander and pace, or get up in the middle of the night. Their mood and behaviors change. And so as a caregiver, trying to kind of understand how to cope with all of that, both for yourself and for your loved one going through that, driving driving becomes an issue and having to take car keys away and having to deal with the
We'll
emotional,
get to that in a second.
the emotional parts of that. So certainly just learning as a caregiver to be there for your loved one through that time, but also being able to provide support for yourself,
Yep.
whether that be through your provider or local support groups.
Well, and too, I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like when you're caring for somebody that's going through this, the health of the caregiver starts to, really take a hit.
It can.
Because you're so focused on keeping the your loved one, secure and in the best shape that you can be without taking care of yourself too much. That's just what I kind of
That
would
is
assume
true.
in this.
Yeah. So when I see patients through a program every 6 months, and I insist that the caregiver come with them. And that's part of the conversation piece, is also not so directed to the patient, but also to the caregiver. You need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because if you're not doing that, you can't be the fullest for your loved one going through that. So making sure that their sleep, that their stress, that their depression, that all of that is being managed and that they're being supportive. Some families have great family, extensions to be able to give them relief, and others unfortunately don't, that they are all their loved one has. So just helping them with all of those challenges, certainly.
Whenever you're speaking with the patient and the caregiver, how important is it to find the balance of who to direct the conversation to?
That is very challenging at times, for sure. You certainly don't want the patient to feel like you're not talking at them or not involving them with their care. But there is this also area of where the patient at some level does not totally understand what you're saying or what recommendations you're having. So it's just a lot of kind of moving your body position to the patient, to the caregiver, kind of back and forth. Maybe you talk directly to the caregiver about what your perception is or plan is, but then turning to the patient and re-engaging in that and affirming what you're saying, and ask them what they think or how they're feeling about the situation, and just making sure that you're making them feel that they're part of the decision making. Very important.
Well, and it's all related, but there was something I saw the other day, and not to put you on the spot, but there's a family that is on Facebook, and they have these reels of their grandfather that has dementia. And what are your thoughts on that? Is it something that, is something for education and to raise awareness? Or, because I'm sure they aren't doing it for attention, but is it one of those things that helps to, in a way, for other people going through this, that here's what we're seeing?
I think putting situations like that out into the public light for other people really kind of accompanies a couple of different things. It does certainly help with awareness to other people. And I think that's very helpful in the Bruce Willis situation. Not a lot of people know about frontotemporal dementia. And so I know his wife has actually been on quite a few talk shows recently, really educating the universe on what that is. And I think that's been fantastic. I also think that it helps the caregivers. It's almost like a coping mechanism for them.
Yeah.
It makes them feel like that they are doing something to kind of help with that. It's kind of like the Alzheimer's walkathon, or if somebody has cancer, doing a fundraiser for that. It helps give them purpose and meaning in a very difficult situation.
And circling back to, we were talking about, taking car keys away. I wanted to focus on, before we even get into the car keys and all the steps that you have to take, is the trust. Because I'm sure whenever you're an older adult and you're, in your 70s and life's been great, you got kids, grandkids, and everything's happy, there's got to be a little bit of a divide whenever you finally get the question or the comments of, hey, we got to start talking about some things and really making sure that you're being as safe as you can be. Does that come into play a lot in the trust of their loved ones too?
It does. It's interesting how life works. We have parents that raise us through being a toddler, teen, and young adult, and then allow us to kind of go on our own. And then we go through adulthood and older age. And then unfortunately, when we get elder and we have things like dementia, then our children are kind of taking in that parental role. And so just as my parents would, get on to me about my driving or make sure that the decisions that I'm making are safe for me, driving or other things, it's kind of a similar turn of events. So certainly driving is one of those things that is certainly a soft spot as far as dementia patients. My grandfather got his license taken away, and I can remember very vividly for years hours, him standing in the driveway, just pacing around his car, very irritated because he was going to go to Secretary of State, I think it was Jesse White at the time, and get on to him about taking his license away. So certainly not an easy decision to make, and something that can pose some challenges for sure.
So let's talk a little bit more about the car situation, because that's always the most common, I think, conversation the siblings or the kids have of the parent is, all right, mom's, 81 and she's having a hard time seeing to begin with. And maybe, it's not from dementia. Maybe it's from some other ailment just from aging.
Sure.
When is it time to start looking for those things, and how do you have the conversation? Because this can go one of two ways.
It can. So, when I have patients that come in that engage in that conversation, sometimes I will have patients that come in and they will acknowledge on their own that it's not time for it's time for them to stop driving. That's the best case scenario, right?
Right.
Because there's not a battle, there's not a challenge.
Can I, before you go,
Sure.
do you do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I sigh at those types of interactions. The more likely interaction, though, is when a dementia patient or other medically ill patient comes in with a caregiver and the caregiver expresses concern of them driving. And it'll be situations where the patient is not following directions correctly, doesn't know how, is running through stop signs or stop lights, is getting lost in the middle of their travel and has to pull off the side of the road because they don't remember where they're going or where they're at.
Wow.
I've had patients that caregivers have come in and reported dents and scrapes on the car that, get there and they aren't sure how it happened. And then the patient, when they're asked, kind of like scuffs it off to be nothing significant. And so things like that are kind of cues to kind of pay attention to. With patients that have driving concerns, it's not just about you as the driver, but you're driving on a street with pedestrians and other people and other cars. And when you get in an accident, it doesn't always just involve you. It can involve other people. And so I try to remind families of that when we do have those discussions.
Absolutely. And so is it one of those things, there's not really a specific time. It's just got to be more of a situational awareness?
Correct.
Okay.
So, I'm not the DMV. I don't take license away, but I do medically recommend that patients should or should not continue driving. And that is documented in my charts, but it's usually when I make that recommendation, most of the time, family has already acknowledged that and is in agreement and on board with that. So I am the one that has to give that, hard conversation to the patient and break it to them. Unfortunately, that's my job. But, it's for the safety of them and for everyone around them, for sure.
100%. And as we're wrapping up our conversation today, going back to more of the caregivers, just because I feel like it's really important. At some point in time, the individual might forget who you are. How do you mentally prepare for that? Do you have any tip? I mean, there's not really a tip or a rubric you can give somebody, but what is the message that you try to relay to that caregiver? Because I've never been in that situation, but I just thinking about it makes my eyes just tear up. I just want to bawl.
So my grandfather forgot who his wife was of 70 years. So I've been through that personally, and that is a common emotional complaint or challenge that caregivers have to deal with. And I think it's kind of like following a situation of grief or loss. And I think for the most part, caregivers do get through that. I just think it takes time. Sometimes it's counseling and help with behavioral health. Sometimes it's just time of dealing with it and acceptance of that. What I have always found is dementia patients, for the most part, and especially when they get into that more severe stage, when they maybe have forgotten that you're their wife or you're their child, they're always happy. And they're happy to be here. They just don't know who you are from day to day. And so just trying to kind of accept that and warm up to them anyhow and enjoy them and love them for what it is, and just understand that it's really not meant to be a personal thing. It's just part of their disease, and just understanding that is important.
So this actually leads me to, I wasn't going to touch on this, but I think we should. And that's whenever someone's combating Alzheimer's and they're going down that journey, how important is it to keep the patient morale as high as it can be with, like you said, providing opportunities to get away, or maybe, you know, having a set routine with activities? Does that help prolong some things, or does the mental health aspect of, you know, being kind of depressed and not really having that motivation take its toll in this?
It's very important. Keeping their morale high is very important, because as someone ages, if they get more and more depressed, they actually lose motivation to eat. They lose motivation to be willing to take their medications. And those two things can play hand in hand on their progression.
Really interesting. And it's something that this whole illness is very fascinating in the most professional way, because there's so many components of this that affect more than just one person. And when I was the other day, I was looking at a research paper, and I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but it was about music and music in dementia patients. Is that something that you've seen that has some type of correlating effect to some positive throughout this?
It does. I actually used to work as a provider in nursing homes. And so, believe it or not, that music therapy that they have at the facilities is actually very helpful.
Wow.
Pet therapy, music therapy, things like that. So definitely, if you have the ability to play music in your home, or have somebody come and play the piano for them while they're sitting in, you know, a great room or community room, certainly is very helpful. Kind of helps calm them. And so it is certainly a form of treatment for sure.
Really interesting. With that being said, where can caregivers go around here if they need some guidance?
So first, I would recommend that the patient get medical care through their primary care provider, but an extension of that are support groups. And so there's Senior Services Plus, Senior Renewal. Alzheimer's disease has local chapters throughout Illinois. They have support groups. Local hospitals have support groups. I know in the year 2024, it's my goal to help provide some support groups within OSF. So that's something that I hope that we start within our organization. So certainly there are resources for support groups for caregivers, and that's something that I very much think is helpful in this whole significant problem.
100%.
Yeah.
And Courtney, I can't thank you enough for stopping by and hanging out with me today.
Nice to be here.
And what I appreciated is she even beat Randy into the building today. I think that's always great. With that being said, we'll take a quick break. We're going to come back. We aren't going to do top of the hour news today. The reason being, Luisa's going to join us to fill us in on Craig Berube getting canned, and it should have been Armstrong, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. He's in the locker room with the guys, so he's going to break down the morale and how everyone's feeling. But coming up this Saturday is Haircuts for Samantha over at the Mirage, where one of their stylists, Samantha, just joined us on the show with all of the girls the other day, is going to have a mastectomy, a double mastectomy in April. And so they're raising funds to help her alleviate some of those costs in the family. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replay that just in case somebody needs to get that information and support her on this journey. We're going to do that here after a quick break on this 14th day of December.